So you wanted a Vita, did you? An improved Vita. Well, this is Mortal Kombat running on the Anbernic RG Vita Pro. But the truth is, Vita emulation is still very rough on Android Linux or overall. The development of it is proceeding, but it is not proceeding at a pace that gives you an experience that's similar to like the PSP. So what we have here is a Pro model that cannot play Vita, but is called Vita. Or shall I say it can play some Vita games like Mortal Kombat here, and can almost play some PS2 games like Tekken here that I show you. But overall, who is this for? At the price point this is asking, it does offer a dual OS of Linux and Android, and it has a beautiful 1080p screen. Its little brother with the T618 has a less resolution screen, a little bit smaller. Today we're going to take a look at the Pro model and talk about it. Who is this for, and why is it called Vita? And if you take away the Vita and the price, what are you left with? Remember to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. But let's hop in and talk about Anbernic's latest, the RG Vita Pro. You've heard of GLP-1s like Wegovy and maybe Mounjaro. And you've heard of the pills coming, but I've got a treat for you. That's right, Dead Fred has a secret. Shh. I'm going to show you how to melt the pounds away. A secret that's long been locked behind doors. It can be yours, if you're willing to pay the price, that is.
So are you ready for the secret?
Yeah, what's the secret? I mean, what could be better than just taking a pill? There can't. What's the secret? Why don't you show me?
You really thought some little pill could replace the true way to lose weight?
There is no shortcut, Fred.
Oh man, I should have known. Yes, there's no quick shortcut. Get out there and touch grass. Anyways, onto the video. And so, as always, the box. And Anbernic likes to change their box around a lot. I like this box quite a bit, as you can see here. It has a nice color to it. Now, this is the Pro box, so we do see that it says the RG Vita Pro here. We do have Anbernic up here in the corner, and then a picture of the handheld here. It's got a nice design to it. It's got a nice feel to it overall. I like the texture used on here, and the mix of colors looks nice. It's an attractive box. If you can imagine this in a store like Best Buy on a shelf or something, I think this box would come off fairly attractive for most people. Looking around the side, there's really not a whole lot here. We do have the two colorways this comes in for the Pro model, the black and the white, which it does show here on the side here. We do have a sticker over ours, but we did go with white. Now, it's interesting because the color I really wanted, the retro color, is only being offered in the Vita regular model, not the Pro. And it was my favorite color for the RG477V and for many of Anbernic's product line. My Cube, for example, my Cube XX. So I wish the Pro had come in that, but anyways, the bottom of the box doesn't have much to it. Opening it up, and we do find inside that we do have a nice foam covering matching it here. But we'll get this out of the way. And we have a user manual. And the user manual here, I think, is a whole lot more effective or important than maybe in past Anbernic models, because we do have the dual booting here of softwares. And as you can see here, it's a nice layout that accordion style. But one of the sections we have here does talk about the system boot up dual system. Log into the Linux system when a system card is installed in the TF1 position. When boot up, it will directly log in the Linux system. In your Android system, when there is no system card in TF1. So as I show you here in a little bit, booting into each one of these, it's pretty straightforward, but there is a way to go back and refer to this if you need to, so it's good to have that. The only other thing that we have in here is this little tiny box, and inside this little box is a USB A to C cord, so no surprises there. Pretty basic package on the inside. I think that the manual does a good job of explaining things. For a pro model, I was hoping possibly we'd have maybe a screen protector or something in there, but I digress. But let's get this put back because we want to take a look at the handheld itself. And so let's get that pulled out and check out the handheld. Okay, so now I have it out of the box, and of course I knew from the images that this would mimic sort of the aesthetic of the Vita, although not quite as svelte. But first in hands impressions, and as usual, this has a build quality that I've come to expect from Anbernic. This has a nice form factor to it. Holding it in the hands immediately, we have the back divots, which from the Vita were there. So the backside looks pretty remarkable, like the original Vita, the Sony Vita. And I like that. It gives it a nice place to hold. The overall profile of this is pretty nice as well, giving it a nice form factor. The white from Anbernic is usually a great clean looking white, and we have the same similar here with a nice looking shell that keeps the consistency of white across the whole unit. There's none of that Game MT mixing whites, which some may like, but I like the pure aesthetic of a solid, consistent white color across. The overall build quality in plastic feels like what you would expect from Anbernic, but it's not quite up for like that Aya Neo type. So we're not at that super premium feeling, but it's a good feeling, and it's probably a great feeling compared to past Anbernic handhelds. The overall weight and composition of it is perfectly fine, and I find that it feels pretty good in the hands to hold. Now let's start testing this hardware. And we do have buttons, typical buttons that you've come to expect from Anbernic here. And they have a good travel distance to them. They feel good to press, and they're a good overall size. I especially like on this white unit, the white with the color buttons on there. I think black is great, but black gets a little boring. So I like that they have white. Again, Anbernic, I wish you would have put the retro colorway on the Pro model, but I do think the white looks pretty nice. The other thing I like is that it has that little aesthetic around with the glass cutout. So since this does have a glass front face, we do have a little cutout here for the buttons, and I like the shape of it. This sort of reminds me of the Vita sort of style shape on that. But it does feel good travel distance. Moving on to the D-pad, and the D-pad feels like what we've come to know from Anbernic. I think Anbernic has settled into a D-pad that has great pivot, a great travel distance, and has a good build quality. It feels nice. It's still not my favorite overall set of D-pads. I think Anbernic can still do a little better and maybe take a look to something like we see on Aya Neo or Retroid, but overall, this is a pretty good solid feeling D-pad. And then we had the sticks. And yes, we are using those better sticks that we saw Anbernic start using first on the 406V way back. And so these sticks have a great travel distance to them. They are replaceable. As you see here, you can remove the stick top and add a stick difference on it. I've shown in other videos, these are the common size of stick tops. So if you have a 3D printer, you can print extra stick tops, or you can go to Etsy and purchase some for those. In fact, if you're looking for a good, decent 3D printer, check below at the link because Aliexpress has some great sales on 3D printers. But this has a great range of motion. It feels really good to hold. I like that they're both on the bottom because either of these CPUs, the T618 or the 3576, is not exactly a super powerful handheld for modern gaming. So having it on the bottom, I think, is appropriate here, especially since the Vita had that sort of style. But they are clicky when you push down. They got a good range of motion. They feel great. The rest of the buttons across this are a little small. I was a little surprised at just how small the buttons on the bottom are. As you can see there, we have the normal Retroid button along with the back home button, and then we have our start and select buttons over here on the bottom. They're super tiny, but they're not very loud. So I think they're pretty good. I like them. They fit in nicely with the aesthetic. They look good. They're just a little smaller than I like, but I do like the placement of them. I've come to appreciate that. Moving on to the triggers, and we come to the first thing that I kind of have a bit of a gripe with. Not so much a gripe, but a sort of like preference. While these are stacked shoulders and the front L1 and R1 are really nice. They have a nice travel distance. They're not super loud and they feel good. It's the L2 and R2, which are not analog. We don't have analog here. We have digital, and they have a barely of a travel distance. They feel so tight. They feel something like maybe I would find on one of these cheaper machines. So I'm a little bit bummed out by that. I wish that it had had the full range. If we're going to go in stacked style, let's have the full range. Otherwise, let's make this thing a little more svelte, and let's put them in a stacked range. Let's put them in inline if we're only going to have digital anyways. One of the things that people complained about the RG477M was the inline shoulders. But I like those, and those would have fit great on this if we're not going to do analog anyways. But we do have stacked shoulders, and they're a little loud, and they just don't have much travel distance to them. So if you like tight, stacked shoulders, you got them there. Moving around, let's take a look at the I/O. On the top of it here, we do have a nice selection of I/O. So we do have a USB-C port. We have an HDMI port on the Pro model. We do have the reset button. We have the volume up and down and the power button. Now the reset button is pretty nice because since we have a dual OS here, we can quickly kind of just reset the machine if we need to get into the other OS. I love the addition of the HDMI, so you can use that with the HDMI out, and it looks great. There's also the vent here for the air, although there's no input, so it's just this little design right here. Moving on the sides, we don't really have anything on either side of it. And then on the bottom, we do have dual SD card slots. Let's take a moment to talk about these SD card slots because Linux is going to run from that first initial TFR slot. It's going to run the Linux on it. You're going to have your games running off the second slot. So you do have the two, which is great for Linux. And then when you're an Android, you can use the second slot as well for additional storage. Overall, and then the back of it has your typical RG branding, saying the RG Vita Pro here, which looks pretty good. Overall, let's talk about the size of this. Now, there's a couple of other handhelds that are in the same sort of price range as the Vita, and maybe not the Vita Pro, because really the Vita Pro is probably maybe pushing a little hard on where it could be. But if we take a look, as you see here, and I'll show you some comparisons to some different handhelds, one of the first ones that comes to mind is the Trim UI Smart Pro S. So similarly, we have stacked shoulders with the digital L2. We have a form factor that's 5 inches versus the 5.5 inches. And you can see here on the thickness of this, how they compare. Now, the Rockchip 3576 versus the A527 or 523, whichever it is, it's in the Smart Pro S. The 3576 is going to have the advantage. The T618 is going to have an advantage of this also. But physically holding this, we do have something similar. Now, I've also talked about another handheld that I've reviewed recently, the knob, the power knob, which is so slim and svelte. And although it's missing the L2 and R2 for PSP, I really like this handheld a lot. But look, as I show them side by side, just how thin this could be. And I'm not sure if it has to do with the use of CPU or whatever, but I would love to have seen Anbernic slim this guy down a little bit, especially since it's not like it has a huge battery in it. But as I show you here in the footage you've seen, comparing the sizes of this, I think that the RG Vita and Vita Pro are pretty good, decent sized handhelds for what you're getting. I think they're fine. I like them quite a bit. But let's take a look at the software, and we're going to start with Linux because Linux is one of the things I was most excited about. I'm not going to review the regular Vita. The T618 is pretty well known what it can do with Android. They've had other ones, so the form factor is pretty close to this. The little difference in the screen resolution, but overall going to be like that. So I'm going to focus on this because this can do Linux and Android. When we come back, we're going to take a look at Linux. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Aliexpress. And specifically, I wanted to talk about the Anycubic Cobra 3 V2 printer. This is an amazing printer that Aliexpress provided to us, and I want to share with you guys just how amazing this printer is. Since it's a bed slinger, it is much better for beginners with less maintenance overall. As you can see here, it beautifully prints all the prints I needed, and it even comes with an Ace Pro box, which allows you to use up to 4 filaments at the same time. This means you can create beautiful multicolor prints. I also wanted to point out that we're having a big sale right now with the Aliexpress 11/11 sale. So be sure to check out the codes below so you can get the best deal on this printer or other printers on their shop. Again, we want to thank Aliexpress for sending over the Anycubic Cobra 3 V2 combo, a 3D printer that I've found to be an excellent starting point for beginners to make all kinds of wonderful projects come to life. Anyways, back to the show. So the way this shipped to me, it came with Linux starting up by default. And there is a way to get into Linux if it goes into Android. And what you want to do is you want to hold the Anbernic button. You want to hold it down, or the function button as they call it, while you reset. And as I show you here, by doing that, it's going to then tell it, as long as the SD card with Linux is in the slot, it's going to tell it to boot into Linux. Now, you have to give it a second to go through and load everything. Also, there are not going to be any games installed when it first does that, so you need to be aware of that. But once it does boot over into Linux, you're going to get a somewhat familiar looking screen to the XX devices. As you can see here, we do have game rooms, followed by RetroArch, followed by search, and an app center, favorites, history, and settings. Now, I hope that custom firmware comes along. I haven't seen if Nully or Rocknix or any MuOS or something's going to be on this. I sure hope that it will be. But for now, I'm going to talk about just the Anbernic Linux experience. And the Anbernic Linux experience is a lot like what we've seen previously on the XX devices. Going into game rooms, once you get some games put in there, you're going to get a nice little menu here, and it's going to give you a setup that sort of controls how things are displayed. One of the things that I like about Anbernic is that they do try to set you up to have a look and feel that is something you could be, expecting of and not be caught off guard with in how it looks and portrays. One of the things that I found under Linux that was a little bit surprising is that Saturn is running pretty good. Now, this is not the Beetle core. We're not going to get, perfect emulation here, but running on the Yansero Saba, I did find that something like Virtua Fighter Kids, actually played pretty good and looked pretty good. You do have decent granular control over the software using the Anbernic button to bring up the Yaba Shanshiro menu. And so you can do things. Now, it had it a default setting of 1080p, which matches this screen. But I set it at 2x because I found that came a way better result. It still looked fantastic. So it's pretty nice. Now, if you want to go into the actual RetroArch, you can do that by going into the RA game and play games that way, which gives you the RetroArch settings and allows you to do things. There are settings for overlays and things like that, bezels you can do. The App Center has some interesting software here. We have not one but two different music players, along with an image viewer, and there's something called Software Manager. Now, Software Manager is going to give you the ability to do things like backup and restore the system data, clear history, install your game resources, restore emulator default settings, or you can start into certain emulators if you want to go straight into those emulators. We do have some standalone emulators like Ether SX2. We have DuckStation. We have Hytrissa, Melon DS, Portmaster, PPSP, Scum, and then you can test the touchscreen. Now, I want to talk about performance here because I was hoping the 3576 would give me pretty good, decent PS2. But I gotta say, I'm disappointed. The PS2 experience on here, under at least Anbernic's Linux implementation, was not that great. I actually found PS2 to work better under Android. Now, maybe I just don't have the right settings. I think that they did try to give a setup that has undervolt and things to do it. But again, at the price point they're asking, oh, it's a little bit tough to think that this thing's not really going to play, because I like that under Linux you can get a better version of supported software. Something like DuckStation did work really great for PS1. That looked awesome. And other stuff. But overall, the Linux experience here is just kind of lacking. But I'm not too down on this because it does mean that custom firmware can come. And I sure hope it will, because I think it can be improved here. So overall, I really like that we do have the ability to do Linux on this machine. And yes, if you're wondering, the touch does work, although it's a little bit jank. But really what set this apart was Portmaster. As I show you a little Portmaster footage here, that is why I think this is great, because taking aside something like the Odin lineup with the S8D2 or the S865 and Retroid, which can do some Linux, I do think that this may be the best Portmaster experience with this beautiful 1080p screen. But other than that, I just don't know. The Linux is not quite what I had hoped for. Switching over to Android, and we get a much more reliable experience. Now, Gamma, I've been told, has also in the works a version of this, which will make Android even better. But once you reboot, unless you go into the Linux side and tell it to go into Linux every time, it's going to go into Android. So as you can see here, as I boot up into Android, we get a familiar looking Android screen here that pretty much is what we've used to seeing on Anbernic. Anbernic does include a lot of preloaded software to make things easy to go, which is pretty good for newbies or beginners. And I did find that something like N64, which we've known for a while, is going to play better on Android than Linux. The beauty here really is the fact that you can bounce back and forth between Linux and between Android, and it's not too hard to do. You just got to keep that card in there and use the right software settings and button combinations to go back and forth. So Portmaster is what I've been using this mainly for Linux. I didn't really use it for PS2. I also been using it for Saturn because it kind of runs better on Saturn on the Linux side. And I think that's what most gamers are going to find. Some of the stuff's going to run better on Linux, some of it's going to run only on Linux, like Portmaster, and some of it's going to run better on Android. Now, one thing that they do include here is Moonlight, and I tried to get that set up, and for some reason, I couldn't get Moonlight set up. Now, let's talk about the big problem with Android in general on this handheld. There's no Google Play services. What is going on? Because Anbernic in the past has provided Google Play services. This one doesn't have it. And so you can't get the apps the normally way you do. It's really kind of bizarre because somebody like GameMT, which used to have no Google services, just launched the EX8 with Google Play support, going in the right direction in my mind. I know some people want to stay away from the Google ecosystem, but it kind of hampers things here because I couldn't get some of the software working. And although Anbernic does give you a wide range of apps built in, I just kind of think it would be better if this shipped with proper Google Play support. Now, when Gamma releases whatever he's going to release for this, maybe we'll get Google Play support back in. I don't know. But let's wrap this video up and give my overall verdict on what I think about the RG Vita Pro and whether or not it has a place in my handheld selection. So what are we left with? Well, we're left with a handheld that has a typical good, if not almost great, quality build that we've expected from Anbernic. It's got a nice design to it with a comfortable form factor that's comfortable to hold, and is fairly thin enough, although maybe a little thicker than I would have ultimately liked. It's got a beautiful screen on it. I have to admit that the screen is very gorgeous. And although the regular Vita has the 720p screen, it's a little bit smaller. I imagine it's as beautiful as well. It has the glass front, which some people are not fans of, but I like. I think it looks fancy and nice on this white color. We do have a new CPU, the 3576, that hasn't really appeared. So we have a new novel CPU to play with, which is fun. And we have Linux and Android out of the box, which is a great experience. The problem is it calls itself a Vita when Vita emulation is really very poor. Even on something like the Odin 3 doesn't make it much better because Vita emulation in general just isn't developed where we need it. That being said, I was a little disappointed in the PS2 performance of this. I probably will do a video comparing PS2 performance of this, the Mangmi Air X, the Aya Neo Pocket Air Mini, and the another in this sort of supposed price range for this, even the regular Vita, just to show. But the asking price of $150 for this is just a little bit up there for me. You do get the ability to dual boot, and that's nice, but I just think that that kind of markets it in a very awkward place. Had this come out over a year ago, it would have been a slam dunk, and I think there could be fans of this. If you just want straight PSP, then I think the regular Vita with the T618 is a great selection for that. But overall, I do think that the RG Vita Pro leaves it in a somewhat funny place. I'm not sure that I would be able to really recommend this for many people. If it's the only handheld you were to get, it's going to give you a great experience to touch on many things like Linux and Portmaster and give you some ability to play a little PS2 and GameCube, and maybe it's just me, but I didn't really see this as being an advantage over the T618 as far as PS2 goes. And perhaps that's really a rock chip thing. I don't know. I'm looking forward to see if custom firmware can improve this. And I do like this. I just think that there's too many questions, a lot of competition, and just a lot other handhelds in a similar price range that probably could provide a better overall experience. But guys, let me know what you think. Did you find the Vita or Vita Pro to be exactly what you hoped for? Was it the amazing device that you thought it could be? Or do you think that Anbernic has just kind of run out of gas here? Leave me a comment. I want to get the discussion going. And as always, remember to hug your loved ones and love your hugged ones because tomorrow is never promised. This one's to you, Cousin Dave, out there in Baltimore. Rest in peace, cousin. See you next time.